A billionaire heard the cruelest sentence from the doctors. His daughter had only 1 month to live. No treatment, no luxury hospital could save her. But inside that mansion, something happened that no one expected. The new maid, ignored by everyone, uncovered a clue that seemed impossible. Suddenly, what was certain death turned into hope. But the truth behind it, maybe it should never have been revealed. Before you begin, click subscribe and tell me something about where you live. What's the weather like today? Roberto was a man who had everything money could buy. After building a vast fortune through his businesses, he lived in a mansion filled with luxury, technology, and staff ready to meet his every need. But none of that mattered anymore. Since his wife passed away 2 years ago, something inside him had shut down. He no longer laughed, no longer smiled, and barely spoke unless necessary. His world had become small and cold, centered only on one thing: his daughter Elisa. The young girl, only 8 years old, had been diagnosed with severe heart failure. Doctors said she had about a month left to live, no matter how much was spent on treatment. Roberto had taken her to the best hospitals, hired the most famous specialists, and bought every promising medication. Nothing helped. His days now consisted of checking medical reports, approving procedures, and watching his daughter slowly fade, always pale, tired, and without joy. That evening, after a long meeting with one of Elisa's doctors, Roberto returned home earlier than usual. He walked through the silent hallway, heading toward Elisa's room to check on her, as he always did. But as he reached the doorway, he stopped. Something was different. He heard laughter, not forced or weak laughter, real laughter. Confused, he stepped closer and looked inside the room. There, sitting on the floor beside Elisa's bed, was Marina, the new maid the housekeeper had hired just a few days ago. She had made a simple crown using small flowers from the garden and gently placed it on Elisa's head. The girl giggled and held a mirror, admiring herself. Her face, usually tired and dull, was lit up with the kind of smile Roberto hadn't seen in months. Marina wasn't doing anything special, just talking to her, playing with her, and giving her attention in a way no one else had managed to do. For a few seconds, Roberto couldn't move. That image stayed fixed in his mind. Elisa wasn't smiling because of some new treatment or expensive gift. She was smiling because someone cared, someone played with her. He had spent millions searching for miracles, but this unknown employee had achieved something no doctor could. A mix of emotions rose inside him: relief, surprise, and something unexpected: jealousy. Why had Elisa responded to Marina in a way she never did with him? He had always tried to do what was best for her. Yet this woman, in just a few minutes, had broken through the walls around his daughter's heart. Roberto felt like a stranger in his own home, watching something powerful and unfamiliar happen between his daughter and a woman he barely knew. Later that night, Roberto sat alone in his study, thinking about what he had seen. Marina was just a maid, someone hired to clean, not to interfere. And yet, she had changed something in that house. He reviewed her file. Nothing unusual. A quiet background, some recommendations, no signs of anything out of place, but what she did that day couldn't be explained on paper. She had touched Elisa's emotions. She had touched his emotions. He realized how long it had been since anyone had made him feel anything real. There was something different about Marina, not in a romantic way, but in the effect she had. She seemed to carry a kind of warmth that filled the space around her, and in a house that had grown cold over time, that was hard to ignore. The next morning, Roberto noticed Elisa was more energetic. She asked for Marina to come back to her room. She wanted to continue the game from yesterday. Roberto sat in a chair nearby and watched. Marina talked to Elisa with ease, told her stories, asked her to imagine magical places, and made her laugh again and again. Roberto felt like an observer in a world he didn't understand. He had been trying to protect his daughter by controlling everything. But this woman, with no training or special background, had brought something to Elisa that he couldn't give. Marina wasn't trying to replace him. She was simply present, and that was more powerful than he expected. Over the following days, things slowly changed in the house. Marina and Elisa grew close. They developed a routine. Small games, short walks in the garden, little stories before naps. Roberto still watched from a distance, unsure of how to respond. Sometimes he felt grateful, sometimes he felt uncomfortable. He had built walls around himself and his daughter, convinced that emotions would only bring pain. But Marina didn't follow those rules. Her presence was honest, simple, and strangely healing. Roberto didn't fully trust her yet. How could he? He had been let down too many times, but he also couldn't deny the truth. Elisa was happier. Even if her health didn't improve, her days were now brighter. One afternoon, as he passed by Elisa's room again, he saw something that stayed with him. Elisa was asleep, holding the flower crown Marina had made days earlier. It was slightly dry now, a bit faded, but she held it close like a treasure. Marina was sitting quietly beside the bed, not on her phone, not distracted, just there, watching over her, making sure she was okay. Roberto didn't interrupt. He stood there for a while, then walked away, deep in thought. That scene reminded him of what he had lost, but also showed him what he might still save. He didn't know what would happen next. Elisa was still very sick. The doctors hadn't changed their predictions, but something had changed inside the house and inside him. Marina had brought a new energy, one that wasn't loud or dramatic, but it mattered. And so, the moment that had started it all, the crown of flowers and the laughter of a sick girl, remained with Roberto. It was the first time in months that he had seen joy in his daughter's eyes. That moment had broken something inside him, but maybe that was a good thing. Maybe something needed to break, so something new could begin. For now, all he knew was that Marina, someone he hadn't even noticed during her hiring, had given his daughter a priceless gift. And he couldn't stop thinking about it. That morning, Marina woke up early with a strange feeling in her chest. Something didn't feel right. Over the past few days, she had noticed how Roberto looked at her more carefully, more thoughtfully. But he rarely spoke to her directly unless it was something urgent or related to Elisa. She had done her best to help, to care for the girl, to bring joy to her days. But Marina was just a maid, and she knew her place. After thinking all night, she became convinced that her presence in the house might be causing discomfort, especially to Roberto. So, quietly and without telling anyone, she began to pack her things. She folded her clothes neatly and placed them in her small suitcase. She didn't have much, just a few sets of clothes and personal items. As she zipped the suitcase closed, she felt a mix of sadness and relief. Maybe it was time to go before she was asked to. Just as she was about to carry her things to the front door, she heard hurried steps in the hallway. One of the older maids knocked on her door and spoke quickly, her voice full of panic. Elisa wasn't well. Marina dropped everything and rushed to the girl's room without thinking twice. Elisa was lying in bed, her face pale and her forehead burning with fever. She was breathing fast and had dark circles under her eyes. Her tiny hands were trembling. Marina immediately placed her hand on the girl's forehead to check the temperature. It was very high. She turned to find Roberto standing at the door, frozen and speechless. He looked helpless, his eyes wide in fear, unsure of what to do. Marina didn't wait for orders. She took control of the situation with calm, clear instructions. "Bring cold water, a thermometer, and call the doctor now," she said. Roberto obeyed without a word. For the first time, he didn't question her. He just followed her lead. As Marina worked to lower Elisa's fever, she remembered moments with her own sister who had suffered from a similar condition. She knew the signs, the danger, and the right steps to buy time before help arrived. She talked to Elisa in a calm voice, encouraging her to stay awake and breathe slowly. She used wet towels to try and cool her down. Roberto watched everything from the side, silent and tense. When the doctor arrived, Marina explained what had been done and what symptoms she observed. The doctor nodded, impressed, and confirmed that her quick actions had helped prevent the situation from becoming worse. Roberto stood there, still processing everything. It was the first time he saw Marina not just as a maid, but as someone who truly knew what she was doing, someone who had just helped keep his daughter alive during a critical moment. That night, the house was quiet. Elisa had finally fallen asleep after the doctor gave her medicine and checked her condition. Marina stayed by her bedside, refusing to rest until the girl was completely stable. Roberto came into the room later, looked at his daughter sleeping peacefully, and then at Marina, who was clearly tired but still alert. He walked closer and spoke softly, something rare for him. "Thank you," he said. It wasn't just a polite thank you. It was real. It was the kind of thank you that comes from someone who understands they were just saved from something terrible. Marina nodded, but said nothing. She didn't need recognition. She only cared that Elisa was safe. But for Roberto, something had changed. That day, he saw Marina differently. Not as staff, not as someone who just happened to be there, but as someone who had become necessary, someone he couldn't imagine the house without anymore. Over the next few days, Roberto found himself thinking about that moment over and over again. He remembered how useless he had felt when Elisa was burning up. He had no idea what to do, no plan, no control. He had always believed money could fix anything, that doctors and technology would save his daughter. But in that emergency, it was Marina, a simple woman with a quiet voice and steady hands, who had taken action. Her experience with her sister had given her knowledge that no expensive education could replace. Roberto had spent so long trying to avoid emotional attachment, to protect himself from more loss, that he had failed to see the people around him. Marina's presence was now something more than just helpful. It gave him hope. And for the first time in a long while, Roberto allowed himself to feel something beyond fear and pain. By the end of the week, Elisa was stronger. She was still weak, still under constant medical observation, but her fever had gone down and she was eating better. Marina remained close, always ready to help, always careful. Roberto had stopped questioning her presence. He now looked at her with respect and trust. One afternoon, he walked into the room and saw Marina helping Elisa fix her hair. It was a simple scene, but one that carried a lot of meaning. Marina had brought comfort, stability, and warmth in a moment when the family was preparing for the worst. She had stepped into chaos and brought calm. Roberto realized then that letting her go would be a mistake. She was no longer just someone who worked for him. She was someone who had saved his daughter when he couldn't. That thought stayed with him longer than he expected. And so, the morning that had started with Marina quietly packing her bags in fear of being dismissed ended in a completely different way. She didn't leave. She stayed. Not because she asked to, but because Roberto now understood something important. She was needed. Her knowledge, her care, and her calm presence had made all the difference during one of the darkest moments the family had faced. He could no longer imagine the house without her. The fear of saying goodbye was still there. Elisa was still very sick, but with Marina around, there was a sense of hope. A small one, but real, and that hope made everything feel a little less heavy. During several nights, Roberto noticed something new happening in the house. At first, it was faint, almost unnoticeable, just a soft sound coming from Elisa's room after everyone had gone to bed. He didn't think much of it the first time, assuming it was the nurse or one of the staff talking quietly. But it kept happening, always around the same time, always calm and steady. One night, curious and unable to sleep, he walked down the hallway and stopped outside his daughter's door. He didn't open it. He just stood there and listened. It was Marina. She was singing. Her voice was low and simple, not like a professional singer, but there was something about the way she sang that made him pause. The song didn't have many words. It was a lullaby, one he didn't recognize. But Elisa, who normally struggled to fall asleep, was completely still, already resting peacefully. As the days went by, that soft singing became part of the house. Roberto began to expect it every night, like a small routine he didn't want to miss. He never said anything to Marina about it. He wasn't sure how to explain what it meant to him, but each time he heard her voice, it did something to him. The house, which had felt heavy and filled with silence, started to feel different, not cheerful, not joyful, but calmer. That song, repeated night after night, filled in the empty spaces. It was more than background noise. It became something he looked forward to. It helped him let go of the constant fear, even if just for a few minutes. It helped him breathe again. And Elisa was changing too. She started sleeping better. Her nightmares stopped. Her mood improved slightly. Even the nurses commented on the difference, but they didn't understand what was behind it. Roberto did. One night, Roberto couldn't help himself. He quietly opened the door just a little and looked inside. Elisa was in bed, her eyes already closed. Marina sat beside her, gently stroking her hair, singing the same lullaby. She didn't notice Roberto standing there, and he didn't speak. He just watched. The room was dim, lit only by a small lamp in the corner. There were no machines making noise, no voices, no stress. Just Marina's voice, and Elisa sleeping calmly. That small scene made something shift inside Roberto. It reminded him of how his wife used to sing to Elisa when she was younger. It reminded him of a time when things weren't so dark. It didn't make the pain go away, but it gave him something he hadn't felt in a long time, comfort. And for a man who had stopped believing in peace, that meant a lot. Roberto never asked Marina why she sang. Maybe it was something she did for her sister before she passed away. Maybe it was a habit. Or maybe she didn't even think much about it. But to Roberto, it became something powerful. He started sitting alone in the hallway after dinner, pretending to check messages on his phone just so he could listen again. Sometimes he closed his eyes and focused only on the melody. The house, which once felt like a place of sadness, started to become a place of rest. It wasn't a full change. Elisa was still sick. Nothing had been fixed or solved. But the song gave them something new to hold on to. And Roberto, who once felt nothing but stress and loss, began to feel something softer, something unfamiliar. Hope. Not the kind that expects miracles, but the kind that helps you get through the day. In the following weeks, that nightly routine became part of their lives. The nurses began to notice that Marina's singing helped Elisa sleep through the night without interruptions. Doctors were surprised by how much better she rested. Roberto, even if he didn't talk about it, knew exactly why. The singing had become a connection, not just between Marina and Elisa, but between Marina and the entire household. It made Roberto see her even more clearly. She wasn't just caring for Elisa's body, she was helping her spirit. She was healing something inside him too. Without trying, without even knowing it, Marina was creating a new environment in the house, one where peace could exist, even during a storm. Roberto didn't know how to describe it, but he felt it. Each night, that melody pulled him back from the edge and gave him something to hold on to. And so, night after night, Roberto continued to sit quietly in the hallway, listening. It became a part of his own healing process. He didn't ask for more. He didn't expect Marina to notice him or explain anything. He was just grateful. That song, simple as it was, had changed everything. Elisa was calmer. The house was quieter, and Roberto, who had stopped believing in good things, had found a small light again. Marina didn't just sing a lullaby. She unknowingly brought something back into that house, a little bit of hope, a sense that not everything was lost. Without big speeches or dramatic moments, she had done what medicine and money could not. She had given Roberto a reason to sit and listen, a reason to feel something again. The song continued, and with it, so did their fragile but growing sense of peace. One afternoon, while walking through the hallway on the second floor, Roberto entered the small storage room next to his office. He had asked one of the staff to look for an old set of documents, and while waiting, he started looking through a few boxes himself. In one of the boxes labeled Staff Forms, he found a folder with Marina's name on it. He opened it, not out of suspicion, but curiosity. Inside, he found the usual documents, her ID, her resume, a few reference letters. But something else fell out. A photo. It showed Marina, younger, holding the hand of a girl lying in a hospital bed. The girl was pale, thin, with tubes connected to her, but she was smiling. Marina, sitting beside her, was smiling too, the kind of smile that tries to hide sadness. Roberto stared at the photo for a long time. It was clear now. Marina had lived through something like this before. That night, Roberto waited in the kitchen after dinner. Usually he would go straight to his study or sit in silence with Elisa, but today he did something different. When Marina came to return a tray, he stopped her gently and said, "Wait a minute." She paused, unsure what he wanted. He poured 2 cups of tea, offered her one, and gestured for her to sit. Marina hesitated, then slowly accepted. They sat at the table, facing each other, not saying much at first. Then Roberto spoke softly, mentioning the photo. "She was your sister, wasn't she?" Marina nodded without speaking. Her eyes got a bit watery, but she didn't look away. "You took care of her until the end," he said, more as a fact than a question. She nodded again. Roberto didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with mutual understanding. The walls between them had started to fall. A few days later, something unexpected happened. It was around 8 p.m., and the house was quiet. Marina was with Elisa, helping her finish a puzzle. Roberto was reading some papers in the living room when suddenly everything went dark. A total blackout. The lights, the machines, even the emergency bulbs took a few seconds to turn on. In that short moment, Elisa screamed from her room. Roberto jumped up and ran, but when he got to the room, he froze. The only light was from the window, and it wasn't enough. Elisa was sitting up in bed, crying and shaking. "Daddy!" she called, panicked. Roberto wanted to help, but his mind went blank. He didn't know where the flashlight was, didn't know what to say. The machines had stopped making noise. He stood there, useless. Marina, without hesitation, sat beside Elisa and began to hum. The same lullaby. Her voice calm, steady. Then she reached for the girl's hand. Elisa started to calm down. Her body relaxed, her breathing slowed. Roberto stood there, still frozen. His hands were shaking, not from the dark, but from the fear that he wasn't enough, that he didn't know how to protect his daughter when she needed him the most. As Marina continued to hum, Roberto sat on the edge of the bed, on the other side. His voice was low and broken when he spoke. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm going to fail her, like I already am." His voice cracked. He didn't expect an answer. He wasn't even sure why he was saying it out loud. Maybe the dark gave him permission. Maybe it was the way Marina handled everything. Calm, strong, prepared. He looked down at his hands and saw how useless they felt in that moment. He felt weak, smaller than ever before. Marina didn't say anything. She didn't try to fix his words or offer some speech to make things better. Instead, she reached across Elisa's sleeping form and placed her hand gently over his. It was a simple gesture, no words, no pressure, just presence. Just a human being saying, "You're not alone." Roberto felt the warmth of her hand, and something inside him shifted. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like the only adult carrying the weight of Elisa's illness. For the first time, someone else shared the burden without needing permission or asking for anything in return. He didn't move his hand away. He didn't speak again. He just sat there, eyes wet, feeling Marina's hand in his, and knowing that something had changed between them permanently. That quiet connection meant more than any conversation. From that night on, Roberto's view of Marina was never the same. She wasn't just someone who cleaned the house or helped with Elisa. She was the only person who really understood what this daily struggle felt like. Not in theory, not from the outside. She had lived it, breathed it, suffered it, and now, instead of turning away from more pain, she chose to stay and help someone else go through it. That kind of strength couldn't be hired. It couldn't be trained. It came from love, from scars, from loss. And Roberto respected that more than he had ever respected anything. He found himself watching Marina differently, not with distance, but with a deep sense of trust. He no longer felt the need to control everything. With her in the house, he could rest, not because everything was fine, but because he wasn't alone anymore. And so, the moment that started with a forgotten photo and ended with a shared silence in the dark became something Roberto would never forget. It marked the exact time he realized Marina wasn't just an employee, and this wasn't just a job. She was a part of the battle. She wasn't there out of obligation, but because she understood what it meant to fight for someone you love. Her support didn't need words. Her presence was enough. In that moment, with their hands joined across a sleeping child, Roberto understood that no doctor, no plan, no wealth could replace what she brought into that home. Real, human strength. From then on, she wasn't standing behind him or beside him. She was with him, sharing the weight he thought he had to carry alone. One afternoon, Marina received an unexpected phone call while she was folding Elisa's clothes in the laundry room. It was from an old friend, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. The friend now worked at a well-known non-profit organization that cared for sick and orphaned children. She explained that the NGO was opening a new branch and looking for experienced caregivers. Marina's name had come up in a meeting, and they wanted her to consider a permanent position. The job was something Marina had once dreamed about, a chance to help children on a larger scale, to turn her pain into purpose. After the call, Marina sat down, holding the phone tightly. It was the kind of opportunity she never thought would come again. But now, with her days so wrapped around Elisa and the deep connection she had formed in the house, the offer didn't feel as simple as it once would have. It was a real choice now. As the day went on, Marina found herself distracted, thinking about the offer. She didn't bring it up to anyone. She didn't want to cause confusion or raise questions before she even knew what she would decide. That evening, after preparing Elisa's dinner, Marina sat quietly in the girl's room while she ate. Elisa was smiling, tired but cheerful, talking about a storybook they were reading together. Marina nodded and smiled, but her mind kept drifting. She remembered how broken she had been when she first arrived at this house, still grieving her sister, unsure of herself. And now, things were different. She felt needed. She had become part of something important. Still, the idea of returning to her old dream made her heart beat faster. Just then, Elisa suddenly stopped talking, touched her chest, and looked up with fear in her eyes. "It hurts to breathe," she whispered. Instantly, Marina dropped everything and moved closer, holding the girl upright. Elisa's breathing became shallow, her lips turning slightly pale. Marina acted quickly without panic. She adjusted the pillows, kept Elisa sitting upright, and gently massaged her back. She asked for calm breaths, counting slowly with the girl. Her voice remained steady. Roberto, hearing the noise, rushed into the room, his eyes wide with panic. But when he saw Marina already taking control of the situation, something inside him shifted. He didn't interrupt. He stood back and watched, feeling helpless again, but also amazed at how calm and capable Marina was. After a few tense minutes, Elisa's breathing began to settle. Marina wiped her forehead and spoke gently, keeping her focus on the girl until everything was stable again. When the worst had passed, Roberto exhaled deeply, almost like he had forgotten to breathe himself. In that moment, the thought of Marina leaving hit him hard. He realized how terrified he was at the idea of losing her. That night, after Elisa had fallen asleep and the house had gone quiet, Roberto wandered through the hallways. He ended up stopping in front of a door he hadn't opened in a long time, his wife's old room. Since her death, it had stayed locked, untouched, full of memories he wasn't ready to face. But something inside him pushed him to go in this time. Slowly, he opened the door. The room smelled like dust and old perfume. The furniture was covered, and everything was exactly how she had left it. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked around in silence. As he opened the small drawer of the nightstand, he found a letter, sealed in an envelope with his name. It was dated shortly before she died. With shaky hands, he opened it and began to read. Her words were simple, honest, and full of love. But one line hit him deeper than anything else. Let love arrive in unexpected ways. Give our daughter laughter, even if I'm not there. He cried, quietly, fully, for the first time in years. Everything that had been building inside him finally broke open. He thought about how long he had tried to control everything, to protect Elisa, to survive the loss. But Marina had entered their lives in the most ordinary way, and yet her presence had changed everything. She brought laughter, she brought calm, she brought life back into a house that had been stuck in grief. And it wasn't just Elisa who needed that. Roberto needed it too. His wife's words stayed with him, like a permission he didn't know he had been waiting for. She had seen what he couldn't, that healing would not come in the ways he expected. And now, here it was, unexpected, real, and standing right in front of him. He wiped his tears, folded the letter, and made a decision. The next morning, Marina was helping Elisa get dressed when Roberto walked in. His expression was different, softer, more open. He waited until Marina had finished and then asked her to stay a moment. Elisa left the room, and the two adults were alone. Roberto cleared his throat and looked directly at Marina. He didn't talk about the letter. He didn't explain everything. He just said, "Please don't go." Marina looked surprised. She had said nothing about the NGO job, but somehow he knew. He continued, "I don't know how to do this without you, and I don't want to. You're not just helping Elisa, you're helping me." Marina didn't respond right away. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from the weight of what his words meant. In that moment, she realized she had already made her choice, and so had he. The door that once stayed shut had finally opened, both in the house and in his heart. The next morning, the house was filled with a calm that felt different. It wasn't silence out of fear or sadness like before. It was quiet but peaceful. Roberto waited in the living room, already dressed and holding 2 cups of coffee. When Marina walked in to start her usual tasks, he asked her to sit. She was surprised, a little unsure, but sat down across from him. He looked nervous but determined. He took a breath and then spoke with a voice that didn't shake like it usually did when feelings got involved. "I don't want you to stay here just as an employee," he said. "You've become much more than that. I want you to be part of this family. I want you to carry our name if you want it. Marina looked at him with wide eyes. She was quiet for a moment, then smiled softly and replied, "I don't need a name to belong. I already do." There were no announcements or big changes to show what had happened, but something had shifted. Marina still did her tasks, helped Elisa, and moved around the house like before. But now there was no awkward distance, no line between them. Roberto no longer held back when speaking to her. Elisa, who already loved Marina like family, only felt more secure. There was laughter in the kitchen again. Dinner wasn't quiet anymore. Even the staff relaxed more around each other. Roberto had learned how to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. And Marina, who once arrived at that house with only a suitcase and painful memories, now walked through it like someone who had built something meaningful there. They weren't bound by blood or paperwork. They were a family formed by experience, loss, healing, and trust. And that was stronger than anything official. Years passed, and life slowly changed its rhythm. Elisa, who once lived minute by minute, started living day by day, then month by month. A suitable donor had finally appeared. The transplant happened after a long wait, followed by difficult weeks in recovery. Marina never left her side, and Roberto never left the hospital waiting room. But the surgery worked. Elisa's heart was stronger now. She grew up. She went back to school. She started dancing again, even if slowly at first. Her body, once so fragile, became healthy, and her face glowed with the energy of a girl no longer fighting just to survive. The doctors had done their job, but everyone knew the medicine hadn't done it alone. Marina's presence, love, and care had given Elisa something to hold on to. The recovery wasn't only physical, it was emotional. It was complete because someone had believed in her even in the darkest moments. One afternoon, under the warm sun in a small community center, Marina stood in a graduation gown. She had gone back to studying a few years earlier, quietly attending evening classes to become a child therapist. It had been her dream long before she arrived at Roberto's house. Now it was real. Elisa, older now, rushed toward her right after the ceremony, wrapping her arms tightly around her. Marina hugged her back just as tightly. Roberto stood nearby, clapping with a proud smile on his face. He remembered everything. Every night of fear, every doctor's visit, every moment he thought he might lose Elisa, and how Marina had stood firm through it all. Now they were all standing in a place of joy. There was no panic in the air, no grief, just pride, relief, and deep happiness. Marina wasn't just the woman who once worked in their home. She had helped build everything they were celebrating now. Later that evening, back at home, the house was full. Friends, neighbors, and family gathered to celebrate Marina's graduation and Elisa's health. The kitchen was full of food, people were laughing, and music played softly in the background. But at one moment, Elisa called for quiet. She stood in the center of the room and asked Marina to join her. Then, with a small smile, she started singing the same lullaby Marina used to sing when she was sick. One by one, everyone joined in. Even Roberto, standing at the back with a drink in his hand, added his voice. The song, once used to calm pain and fear, now echoed through the house with a different meaning. It wasn't about sadness anymore. It was about victory. The same melody that had once filled the halls with quiet hope was now a song of celebration, of survival, of life that had continued against the odds. Roberto stood by the window, watching everyone, and thought back to the man he used to be. Cold, closed, scared to lose again. He had believed that miracles didn't happen, that people only cared when paid, that emotions were weaknesses. But Marina had proved him wrong every step of the way. She didn't just save his daughter. She helped bring him back to life, too. She turned a house of silence into a home again. And she did it not by force, not by asking for recognition, but just by being present, by loving without fear. That was the miracle. Not just Elisa's recovery, but everything that came with it. The family they built, the hope they carried, and the life they now lived. Roberto finally understood that miracles weren't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes they were people who showed up, stayed, and gave everything they had without needing anything in return. Marina was that miracle, and that's a wrap. I'm so glad you stayed with us all the way to the end. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments what you thought of the story and tell us which part you liked the most or the least. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. See you in the next one.